You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. I'm your host, Donovan Woods from NACS as well as the Fuels Institute, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Britt with NACS.
So Britt, we talked a little bit about Fuels 2018 prior to this episode, and I wanted to dive back in a little bit deeper, and we had a guest with us, Tammy Klein from Future Fuel Strategies, and I'm curious to see what you guys talked about.
Yeah, Tammy's really smart, and she comes she just has a really cool global perspective, and she has been a guest on Convenience Matters a couple times previously, so she's familiar with us. She actually has her own podcast, and we had a good conversation, and I think you guys are going to enjoy just hearing what she has to say about kind of the global effects, health effects, what is on the horizon, what we should keep in mind, and so maybe some uncertainty as well, but also tremendous opportunity that we have before us.
All right, so let's roll the tape and see what Tammy has to say.
What are the most influential global developments affecting the fuels and vehicles market?
Well, I think the biggest thing, as I talked about for many countries, it's really the implementation or the aspiration and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So the need to decarbonize, and in particular decarbonize transport, is really driving legislation, regulation, policy movements in a lot of countries. So that's really the first thing. And I say aspiration versus implementation because countries have put forward plans of what they want to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sort of comply with what they've said they're going to comply with for their targets. But I think now in the next couple of years, the rubber is going to hit the road here where we actually see, okay, are they able to do it? And then at the same time, I think they're going to be pushed more and more to even go further than what they've already said they would do. So I think that's really the major thing that's happening. I think the second thing that's a really big driver is the continuous need to do something about air pollution, not just transport-related air pollution, not just in developing countries. So oftentimes we think, oh yeah, the air is terrible in Beijing or what have you. This really isn't just a China issue or an India issue. It's an issue that actually still impacts a number of cities in the US, but also impacts a number of cities in Europe. And so that's why you see, a lot of discussion surrounding these issues of car bans and, is the car toxic from a health perspective, so on and so forth. So I think those are the two big drivers. And then there's others as well that sort of come out from that. But those are the two big ones, I think.
Yeah, I really like it's not just a China issue or an India issue, it's a global issue.
Right.
Is the transportation air pollution issue. So thank you for that. Okay, so kind of moving on, I'm curious, how might federal and state regulations affect the future of the markets?
Oh my Lord, that's a big one, especially at the federal level. Exactly. But I think at the federal level, it's really hard to say because we're just in a time with this particular administration where we really don't know, what they're going to come up with. Unlike in previous administrations, you could sort of scope out, okay, it's a Democratic administration. They're probably going to think along these lines. They're a Republican administration. They're probably going to think and act along these lines. With this administration, it's like a box of chocolates. You really don't know what you're going to get. And I think that's introduced a lot of uncertainty into the fuels market, for retailers, I think for fuel producers, refiners, marketers, biofuel producers, and also for the car companies as well. So I think there's a level of uncertainty here with the regulations that we actually already have on the books. Corporate average fuel economy, greenhouse gas emissions for vehicles is one, and who knows what's going to happen with the renewable fuels standard and where that's going to go. No one can really predict it. And I think that's the next few years, that kind of uncertainty is probably not good for for the industry as a whole. And then the states are kind of interesting because there are a number of states that have said, okay, we're going to fill the vacuum, especially on climate. And so, one of the other speakers talked about today in the conference about how states might move forward with things like, or regulations like, low carbon fuel standard. Just like we're seeing, in California. So, that's an interesting, sort of development there to see, how many states will actually, go, in that direction. So that'll affect the types of fuels that are sold out there, and that could get really interesting. But I also want to say one more thing. It's really not just the federal and the states, but it's also what's happening at the city level. And that's where, John Perkish talked about, oh my God, are we going to need to get lobbyists for the city, for the city level? And it's like, well, as I said today, yeah, and that might be a real possibility because cities are doing their own fuels now, and I know people in the fuels industry that have said, look, we don't know what's going to happen with the RFS. We don't know what state governments are going to do. We're going to go out and make our deals with cities. We're going to find the markets we want to be in. We're going to go meet with city officials, and we're going to get deals done. And so the landscape of the types of fuels that could be out there, along with the types of vehicles, I haven't really even talked about electric vehicles, also could really change over the next 10 years or so.
I find that fascinating. An already tremendously complex system with regulations, coming out of our ears, and we're just trying to figure this out. Let's add a layer of, city infrastructure to the whole thing too. So federal, state, city. It's just, how are we going to figure this out? Mm-hmm. So there's opportunity. It's not doom and gloom. It's just, how do we align so that we're speaking the same language here?
That's right. And I think it's sort of venues like this. I really think we should have something like this on the international level as well, because there are, as I said in my talk, it's like, okay, there's the industry that's doing its thing over here. So the fuel retailers, fuel providers, the car companies, heavy duty vehicle engine manufacturers, they're kind of doing their thing over here. And then there's like this whole other discussion at this, international or sort of supranational level that's happening. And there is some interaction you see in different sorts of venues, but there's really not a lot of sort of that collaboration together. So it's almost like different silos that are doing their thing. So anyway, I think it's events like this, that sort of bring the stakeholders together, as John was saying, this morning, sort of getting people out of their comfort zone and out of their particular boxes to sort of see another side of what other stakeholders are doing and thinking. I think that is just so important, and I think we also really need it on the international level as well. But
no, I agree with you, and I think that's the whole point of bringing everybody together, where it's not going to be combative. We're not trying to convince people of something or the other. We're just trying to be like, we have to have a conversation about this, and we have to be adult about this. And your business and your market and your silo needs certain things, but we do too. How can we work together? We just need to have these conversations. So from the horse's mouth, absolutely. Thank you. So kind of wrapping up here, in general, what are you seeing happening in the next 10 years? Can you kind of give us what's your prediction, if there's anything to predict?
Well, it's that's a tough one. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I had to guess some of the things that we could be seeing over the next 10 years, we're definitely going to see a lot more electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles in particular. As I said, I don't think we're going to see it at the level that, some have forecasted. It's not, and I don't see the end of the internal combustion engine vehicle, but I see continual improvements in both the vehicles and the fuels. I think the emphasis on carbon and sustainability will continue. So I think we'll begin to see more of a mixture of vehicles, types of vehicles out there. So battery electric vehicle, we'll begin to see more fuel cell type vehicles just beginning to sort of trickle in. We'll see internal combustion engine vehicles. So we'll see those being driven individually. So people will still continue to buy vehicles, but we'll begin to see people begin to not maybe own those vehicles, but they might be on like a subscription service, which is already starting. So today they might drive an F-150 because they need an F-150 for a particular use. Tomorrow they may order up an electric vehicle because they have a short range and a bunch of errands to do. So the way in which people use cars or use vehicles will begin to, I think, to shift and change. And then I think we'll see this more at the city level. I'm not sold on this whole concept of ride sharing and autonomous, and everybody's going to be in an autonomous vehicle together, and you'll be sharing this vehicle with strangers, and you'll be driving off somewhere. I think there are real issues there. First of all, the first thing I think of, frankly, as a woman, and people have looked at me kind of cross-eyed, but it's like, I'm sorry, this is a real issue, is safety. I don't know you, and I don't know if I want to get in a car with you.
I don't think that's the best decision I can make right now.
Exactly. So, but I do think we will begin to see, more ride. Of course, other people may be more comfortable with that, and that's fine. But we'll begin to see, more sharing, maybe more sharing going on, but maybe in the large cities, and the cost of sort of getting around and doing that sort of will tip people to toward that kind of option. In terms of autonomy, I think we're a ways from that, but the testing, we'll sort of begin to see. I think the next few years for autonomy are going to be critical, because if we see more Tesla crashes, if we see more things going wrong, the trust level is just going to go in the toilet.
Right.
So I think we'll see more of that. And then again, the fuels options will expand, as well. So we'll have some electrification. We'll have things like, more biomethane. We'll have, more, we'll still have ethanol, and it will become cleaner and more, even less carbon intensive, than it is now. So it's, if for the fuel retailer side, it's going to be like, it's,
right.
It is an opportunity, and it is a challenge, because you have all these types of vehicles for all these types of different types of vehicles, different types of purposes, and different types of fuels. But therein lies it's the challenge, but it's also, I think, the opportunity as well.
Agreed. And we've kind of been posing this question to several people. Where do you see the market going? How do you characterize the market in 10 years? I would be curious, if we were to rewind the clock 10 years from where we are now, like what would we have said 10 years ago? And, how is that matching up? And why is this kind of magical number? I think because we're on this precipice of so many things. Right. And I think we probably have come a long way. But it's like we're on the verge of something big, and 10 years is going to be quite telling. So, if you were to add up, the 10 years ahead of us and the 10 years that are behind us, that's going to be a pretty big step, I think. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts while we have you?
Well, I mean, it is, this is really, again, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And I find it really, I really enjoy doing this, because it's just so multifaceted. There's just, it's really the intersection of technology and consumer preference, and some of these other issues, caring for the environment and climate and all these kinds of things. And what fascinates me about this, and why I like doing it, is it's complex, and it's so multifaceted, and there's so much new that's happening. So we could be looking at a totally different, we could be looking at a kind of slightly better version of the same world.
Sure. Sure.
Or we could just be making some giant leaps forward. And I do agree with you. The next few years, I think, are really going to determine what our next 10 years and beyond are going to look like. But I think the one thing I do know for sure, and that is that this train has definitely, no pun intended, but this train has definitely left the station, with this need to decarbonize and air pollution and electrification and these technology developments. It's just, what's the end destination? So that'll be kind of fun to watch.
Agreed. Complex would be an understatement, I think. And hopefully if you want to say the damage done, we're not to the point of no return. So if we, let's really start to get our ducks in a row and figure out what the next steps are.
Right.
Thank you, Tammy, so much for being with us.
Wow, nice job, Britt. I think this gives proof as to why Tammy's been on our show so frequently. And just a quick takeaway from this that I've gathered is everything we're dealing with is not just a United States issue. It's not an India issue. It's not an Africa issue. It's a global issue. It affects all of us. So we appreciate everyone for listening in and taking a chance to learn more about the issues that affect all of us. And welcome. Thank you again for joining us on Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.